RiseAbsorb is redefining what growers expect from phosphate fertilizer. Backed by data and built for performance, RiseAbsorb helps reduce phosphorus losses, improve uptake, and boost ROI without increasing input costs. Join the next wave of growers switching to the next generation of phosphorus fertilizers by visiting phospholutions.com.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to this August 20th edition of RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith, and well, it is Wednesday, which means we are going to talk markets. Today's show may be a little different. Not a ton of grain info. No, I decided to take it a little bit more of a livestock route. So you're going to hear from Paul Marchand. He's with HAMS Marketing, based just outside of Winnipeg, Manitoba. Of course, the Canadian hog market is absolutely tied and dependent on the U.S. market. So we will sit down, talk about all the trends, all the uncertainty, and frankly, some of the opportunity within the hog industry. I've also got Don Close. He's with Terrain. We're going to talk about the news we had late last week on what the U.S. is doing looking forward about New World screwworm, and what that might mean for the reopening of the border between Mexico and the U.S. to live cattle. Spoiler alert, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. So Don is going to break down what that may mean for cattle supplies and, of course, how that trickles down into price, not just, of course, in the U.S., but here in Canada, as cattle flows are likely to change. And what will that mean? So I've got a lineup of questions for Don. And then also, just after the break, stick around. You're going to hear from Jake Leguee. He's a canola and wheat producer out of Saskatchewan, grows a couple other crops as well. You probably recognize him from this show, and he's very active on social media and within agriculture policy groups as well, producer groups. But he wrote a really great op-ed that, admittedly, fired it off right after the tariff news broke last week. And I wanted to ask him a couple questions about some of the key points that he brings up in that op-ed, about how he feels on how the Canadian government is handling China diplomatic relations and all these tariffs, and if he's got some ideas on how he would like to see the government potentially handle this situation differently, offer support for farmers, etc. So that'll be right after the break, so stick around for that. And then to round out the show, we've got plenty of news to cover, so I will do my best. Thank you, everyone, for your love and support when I do the news. I'm not great at it, but as they say, practice makes progress. So there you go. Okay, if you've got feedback on today's show, which I suspect you may, 1-855-776-6147 is our RealAg feedback line. You can drop me an email, as many as you have, and I really do appreciate it. lsmith@realagriculture.com. It's okay if you don't agree. That's fine. I still want to hear from you. So there you go. Or, of course, you can find us across social media. Do not miss our YouTube account. I got to tell you, we've got some fantastic videos there. Yes, the radio show ends up there, of course, on our podcast feed as well. But we've got so many great visuals to go with it, and so many great video series that you do not want to miss. So go subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll be glad you did. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and I'll be back with Jake Leguee right after this. Protect your anhydrous ammonia application earlier than normal this fall. Defend against potential losses and protect your bottom line with new Centuro A-Pro Nitrogen Stabilizer. Patented active ingredient pronitridine offers agronomically effective protection where it matters most, below ground. The new concentrated formulation lowers application rates. Start early with Centuro A-Pro as part of your nitrogen management plan. Contact your local retailer or visit centuro.ca for more information today.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Nearly 600 trials demonstrate that Rhizosorb allows growers to use as much as 50% less phosphorus without compromising yields in major row crops such as corn and soybeans. Multi-year, multi-location, replicated research trials demonstrate that Rhizosorb at reduced application rates maintains or increases yields without lowering soil phosphorus levels. If you have additional questions about Rhizosorb, please contact your Phosphollutions regional sales manager or visit phosphollutions.com.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. Get ready for outstanding emergence in 2026. Have your Vaterstad seeding and planting equipment inspected at an authorized dealer by November 15th, and you'll receive a 15% discount on needed replacement parts. Contact your local Vaterstad dealer to learn more. All right, we go now, as promised, to my conversation with Jake Leguee. He's a farmer out of Saskatchewan, and he's written an op-ed regarding the tariff situation with China, and he's got some advice for how he'd like to see the Canadian government deal with this issue. Joining me now from near Fillmore, Saskatchewan, it's Jake Leguee. He's a, canola and wheat farmer, but there's probably a few other things in the rotation. And you probably recognize him from the Farmer Rapid Fire. But today we're talking very specifically about this canola tariff issue. Jake, welcome here.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Lyndsey.
Now, as I mentioned, of course, it's been a heck of a week in Western Canada for canola growers, staring down the barrel of this nearly 80% tariff. It's 76-ish tariff that China has imposed on Canadian canola seed. What was your first reaction when you got news of this?
I mean, in some sense, I guess it shouldn't be terribly surprising that China took action against Canadian canola. I mean, they certainly signaled that close to a year ago now that they were interested in coming back at us for the EV tariffs. But at the same time, I mean, that isn't our day job to be watching what foreign markets are doing. We're getting very close to harvest, so our focus is on the crop and getting it off as good a condition as we can. So, I mean, we're desiccating lentils, we're combining winter wheat, and this news comes out. It obviously is still a bit of a shock, even if there is sort of that deep-seated expectation that something is coming. The day that it comes is still a surprise and a disappointment.
Now, for those who follow along or follow you on social media, they'll know that you will put your thoughts down, pen to paper, although it's not a pen anymore, or paper, but did write a column sort of outlining your frustration over, how we even got here. Because as you mentioned, it isn't a surprise. China had announced other tariffs on meal and oil. We know that this is how China does business or tries to exert, what it wants, and that it is retaliation for Canada imposing 100% tariffs on EV vehicles from China. In that op-ed that you wrote, you view this very much as the Canadian government choosing, essentially, one sector over another. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the Canadian government has to make a lot of choices about everything. When it comes to foreign policy, obviously, they have to decide when they're dealing with a market like China that can be difficult and can be quite reactive, how to best protect its industries. And I wouldn't presume to understand all the nuances of the EV tariffs. But certainly when those tariffs went on, it became quite clear to us very quickly that there were going to be consequences for this that were probably going to land on us. Canola is a symbolic product of Canada. China does like to use it as an example. We've seen it before, and not that long ago. So, when that happened, it was just that feeling of, oh, here we go again. Now, the choices that that Ottawa makes when it comes to protecting EV tariffs, I'm not trying to pick on one party or another. It does sound like that was fairly unanimous, but the impact hits us, and certainly did in a big way this time. So I guess the question that I have to ask is, okay, so you've made this decision to protect this industry, partially to align with the United States, but, obviously there is an interest in protecting the auto industry. The impact is going to be borne by farmers. So what are we going to do about that? And I think what I've been very disappointed by so far is there just hasn't been a lot of conversation. There hasn't been a lot of position statements by our prime minister or agriculture minister, a couple of ex-posts talking about that this is a problem, they're going to deal with it. But, actions matter more than words. And like I said earlier, this wasn't necessarily a huge shock that something happened with tariffs on canola. So the fact that the government has yet to make a response in any significant way beyond some words is disappointing. There was very quick activity when the auto sector was threatened and other industries in the East threatened, understandably so. The survival of those industries was at stake because of tariffs from the United States. But this could change the canola industry as we know it and could have an enormous impact on the future of our farms. And, it's an industry that's worth, better part of $40 billion, $5 billion exports to China. And we continue to not hear a plan. And that part of it has been quite disappointing. So I think, in terms of East versus West, I don't want to get caught up in that. But it does seem like there isn't quite as much interest or activity in supporting an industry that may very well need it if these tariffs stick.
What would you like that support to look like? Do you have something in mind as to what the government could be doing that maybe they aren't doing?
Yeah, obviously it's a complicated situation, and I don't want to sound like there's just these 5 quick, simple solutions that are going to solve the whole problem, because that isn't the case. I do think that there are a few things the government could do to at least signal to farmers that they are interested in helping us out. Dropping the EV tariffs is probably unlikely at this point. There seems to be cross-party support, and angering the Americans beyond how angry they already seem to be at Canada, at least within the American government, is probably not the best approach when they're our largest market for canola. So if that's not a solution that's on the table, perhaps it isn't that simple to get China to just drop the tariffs. So we have to find other solutions if that's the case. Renewable diesel and biodiesel has been touted as a huge opportunity, sustainable aviation fuel. But, we still have some issues to deal with the Americans when it comes to, the renewable identification number credits and everything else that RealAgriculture has done a lot of work on reporting on. If we could get some changes made there, that could honestly solve a huge part of this problem. Renewable diesel could be a larger opportunity in Canada as well. This discussion about forcing all new vehicle sales to be electric within the next decade, that's not very helpful on that front either, and has a whole bunch of other problems that have got farmers quite upset as well. There's some opportunities there. I also think this is a great opportunity to take a better look at agri-stability. We saw some very small improvements put forward during the election or right before the election campaign. We're still looking at getting paid a percentage of a reference margin. It's not going to help in this situation unless the farm is already experiencing a loss, because agri-stability is not going to kick in to protect a profit. It's going to kick in to prevent a catastrophic loss. Okay. When agri-stability was first released, it was 85% of the reference margin. Maybe we could look at going back to that, or maybe we need to tear the whole program down and start over. But right now, that program isn't working, and it isn't going to protect farmers in this situation. Direct payments, it's an option that I hesitate to ask for, because getting government more involved with my farm isn't what I want. But the reality is that government has made political decisions that has put one of our largest export markets at risk. Now, the reason for those decisions is what it is, but those decisions were still made, and we're still getting impacted by them. So the government is going to have to do something about this. If it's just going to let this market go away and let the canola market sort itself out, I would say this is a disappointing response, because the importance of this industry, and because this is something that we've absolutely no control over as individual farmers. If the government is going to make political decisions that are going to impact my livelihood, I don't think it's too much to ask for them to look at possible solutions to at least minimize the impact of that.
Do you think, in covering this issue and speaking with so many farmers like yourself in Western Canada, we often hear there isn't necessarily a ton of support for Canadian biofuel policy. I'm not going to say that's across the board, but if we're going to hear pushback, it often is on the Western Canadian side. Do you think this will shift the needle for some of those farmers who have struggled maybe to support a biofuel policy or a more expansive biofuel policy because of these structural changes to the market that really could be, as you said, I mean, if this tariff doesn't go away, that's a huge market that won't be taking Canadian canola, at least directly.
It's hard to say what the impact will be on farmers' perception of the clean fuel standard. I mean, farmers have an aversion to, being taxed. That's part of the reason the farmers have been so opposed to carbon tax, I being one of them. The clean fuel standard, though, does have an opportunity, quite a significant opportunity for Canadian farmers. And I think, farmers need to look very carefully at it before dismissing it as another, climate change program. Rural parts of Canada could really benefit from this too. This isn't just benefiting farmers, programs like this. To me, I think this is an opportunity that we really need to be looking at. We just think so differently about this than the American farmers tend to. Biofuels have been a huge part of the American farmers' income stream for quite a few years now. They're very supportive of it. That support doesn't seem to be as strong here, and I've never exactly understood why, but I think it's time for that to change.
Mm-hmm. I would say I observe something very similar, Jake, on the western side. Here in Ontario, it aligns, I think, a little bit more with the U.S. because of corn and because of the ethanol side. So, and maybe that's part of the reason is that has sort of led on that side, but it is just such a huge user of the crops that farmers grow, and that demand sometimes can make all the difference. So, definitely a lot of dynamics to try and balance here. Jake, thank you so much for making time. I know it is, as you mentioned, a busy time of year. You're on and off the sprayer and prepping for harvest. So I do appreciate the time so much. For those who maybe want to read your column that you wrote, what is the website where they can go and check it out and read it?
Go to thelifeofafarmer.com to find it.
All right. Jake, thanks so much for joining me here on RealAg Radio. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Lyndsey, for the opportunity.
All right. We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Every seed starts a story at Alliance Seed. A seed holds the promise of successful harvest each year, from the first day of planting as your crop grows and navigates the challenges of weather, to the final load from the last field. It all begins with the seed you choose. Trust Alliance Seed to guide your choices by providing the expertise and information needed to match the right seed to your farm's unique potential. Start your success story with cereal and pulse varieties by visiting allianceseed.com. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is a video series that showcases the latest in canola research and production agronomy. Learn from some of the best at your own pace through quick and timely producer-focused videos available on our YouTube channel. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is the quickest way to keep up to date on all the latest in canola production. Boost your canola IQ with the Canola School, brought to you by BASF, and visit canolaschool.com.
Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola, it's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Wednesday, August 20th, and I'm your host, Lyndsey Smith. This segment brought to you by FP Genetics. FP Genetics brings new seed genetics to Canadian farms, empowering growers to thrive in ever-changing conditions. Visit fpgenetics.ca and join thousands of Canadian growers who trust FP Genetics to deliver innovative, reliable, hybrid fall rye seed genetics season after season. Experience the next wave. Joining me now is Paul Marchand. He is the Senior Risk Management Analyst with HAMS Marketing based at Headingley, Manitoba. Paul, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Now, you spent your days digging into the hog markets. What is the latest? What is happening? Are we on an upward, downward? Are we holding steady? Catch us up.
To start off, I guess I would differentiate between the two markets we could be talking about. So first is the cash market, and then there's the futures market, which will drive a forward contract price in Canada. The cash market has been performing very well. We saw the typical summer rally develop in June. And while if you would have asked me in April if we would have seen cash prices in CAD CKG equal to what we saw in like 21 or 22, I didn't think that was possible. By late June, the weekly price was outperforming both 21 and 22. Came back kind of later in the summer around July. What's interesting now today in the cash market is that we've been trading sideways for basically about 3 weeks. So in US dollars per hundredweight, that's hovering around the 107 US dollars per CWT level. Do the conversions for metric and exchange, and we get around 260. Talking about the national-based program, so that would be producers delivering to Brandon or Moose Jaw. And that's quite exceptional. And what stands out as being exceptional about that is because typically by marketing 31, at least in the post-2020 marketing environment, the cash price has dropped notably as a trend. And that's been consistent since 21, 22, so on and so forth. That hasn't happened this year. So we're keeping a close eye on that. We can talk about why I think that's happening in a little bit. In terms of the futures market, that's, of course, all about reference of time, right? So if we're talking about like what's it done since the beginning of the year, well, it's quite strong. What has it done since, I'm just looking here, since the middle of June? It's pulled back a little bit. Today we had a bit of a down day, but overall I would say that the futures market been trading sideways in a very technical pattern.
So let's unpack this a little bit then. From the cash side, as you mentioned, surprising strength there. What do you think is driving that?
A couple things. In a nutshell, or the shortest way to articulate this, maybe jump into the conversation, is that the cutout is being counter-seasonally high right now as well. We've seen recently some pullbacks, but I mean, the cutout typically will lead the cash prices, and we've seen a counter-seasonal support in bellies, which is a little unusual for this time of year because, again, when you get to marketing week 31, it's almost like it hits a wall, and all of a sudden we see it drop quite substantially, and that hasn't happened this year. The why of that is a little up for debate, but I think there's been a pretty compelling argument to be made about the short supplies. Now, when I say short, I mean tight. I'm not talking about a shortness in supply that we saw, with the disruptions that we saw in 2020 during the COVID-19 shutdowns. And I'm not talking about a shortness in supply in terms of what we saw in 2014 with the PED outbreak. But there had been a PRRS outbreak, and prior to that, there had been 200 sow units, Smithfield in the U.S. that had closed. Again, in April, when people were talking about it, I hear that there's PRRS, outbreaks, and I hear that there's upticks and that sort of stuff. When you look back earlier to previous PRRS incidents that were appearing, they weren't necessarily showing up in the data right now, right? Or at the time that we were looking at it. And so when you start to hear about some of these PRRS instances that were showing up, and they were kind of equal to or around the same levels that we saw in 2023. And of course, in 2024, we didn't really see any significant or sort of reduction in supplies because of any sort of disease outbreak in the States. At the time, I was saying, yes, there are PRRS outbreaks. We're aware of them. They seem to be regional. It's not very much widespread. But what has happened is that since October of 2024, those higher levels of what they call sequence detections was pretty consistent from October to June and only recently dropping off. And so just to kind of parse this out a little bit, you look at slaughter levels and pork production levels to get a sense of what like the actual production is on the ground, to find out if there is going to be a hole developing because of any sort of instance. And what we were seeing is that over the previous 4 weeks, the pork production has actually started to come down. And if you time it with where were those PRRS instances first showing up, if we started in July, well, the first instances started to show up in October, count forward 9 months, and there you go. So because they have remained elevated from last October to this June, we are now seeing somewhat of a ipso facto causal effect relationship between increased PRRS events that have been consistent. That's the thing that's missing from 2023. And 2023 was inconsistent. There was a spike for 2 months, and then it went back down to normal. So this is more back to back to back to back sort of thing. So if you have a consistent sort of issue with the disease outbreaks, then this could be starting to show up in the numbers. And, if you look at the pork production now, I think it is starting to show up. And so if that's the case, then, how long can we expect this to go? Well, then in June, another 9 months.
There's, of course, always the second part to this, whereas if we've got tight supply, what is the demand piece in this? Are we headed into increasing demand pulling back? I mean, proteins at times swap out one for the other, and I don't know about you, but I can't afford steak these days. So right. Pork is pretty popular in our household. So what is the demand trend suggesting?
If you want a real time sort of gauge on what the demand picture looks like, you just look to the cutout. And the cutout is counter seasonally, well, not counter seasonally. Some of the primals are starting to creep seasonally lower starting last week. But I mean, the values are relatively high. So that would be that's an aggregate demand. That takes into the domestic disappearance and the export disappearance, both sides into account. On the export side, it's a bit of a mixed bag, rather. We're about down 4% and a decimal relative to a year ago. That's because likely of some of the challenges that we're seeing with the tariff applications, the threat of retaliation. Right. There's probably what I would guess is some consumer behavior and user behavior in export markets is going, we don't want to deal with the nonsense. And by nonsense, I mean the lack of clear rules. I don't care who's in the administration. If the trade doesn't have clear rules, it makes it difficult to do business. If you have a competitor that has clear rules, and this seems to be changing by the day, you may get some people looking elsewhere. I don't know if that's a function today of what's happening. What I can tell you is that the China response in May was absolutely 100% because of the tariffs, going from 35,000 metric tons per month, roughly on average, to 6,700 for the month of May. Back up in June. Interesting. Time to rate when, the 145% tariffs went on, then they got away. They're still towered at 57% now, which is way higher than most favored nation status. But so Chinese trade is normalized somewhat. But if you want a causal effect of like, we put the tariff on here, there's an escalation, there's a bit of a dispute, and then the tariff is resolved, you just have to look at China for that.
Right. And so is that, in looking at some of that uncertainty, and I appreciate the way you sort of phrase that, right, is that it's not even so much about the actual decisions. It's the fact that tariffs are on, tariffs are off. What can move, what can't, they're high, they're low. It's the uncertainty of trying to plan ahead and trying to make decisions that just adds risk and volatility to these markets. So when you look forward at those futures prices, as you said, that perhaps are not necessarily following the same trend line as cash prices, what is behind that? Is that somewhat trade uncertainty based, or are there other factors that may be pulling back futures prices, if that's the case?
My opinion is that the futures market is trading in this technical and sideways pattern for exactly that reason, that there is a lot of uncertainty. So no one's willing to put their neck out too far and take that position. Say, I believe that this is going to be, anything is going to be the case. We're going to see the tariff resolution resolved really quickly, and we're going to have a more normalized trade, and this is what it's going to look like. So we're bullish because of the tight supply. This ramps up considerably. We just saw the second round of tariffs going on August 7th. So there is going to be a policy lag here too. And if there is sort of one thing that I would like to promote or at least highlight here is that there is a lag between when something goes into effect and when it actually starts to impact the supply and demand chains. Yeah. So I don't think and I don't think it happens in a month or two. We could be looking at, nearing to see a quarter or more before we start to see a disruption in act or a response to the policy, or even some of these inflationary pressures that we're talking about. Of course, the proponents of the tariffs are going to say, look at the next economic data and go, there's no inflation here and they're working fine. The detractors are going to point at any little possible thing to say, like, here's the thing that we have to be looking at. This is why they're dangerous. And the reality of the situation is going to take a while for that to play out, right, for it to cycle through the economy. So, that was kind of a tangential way to get to the futures chat, which is just basically like, I'm looking right now, again, December's fairly technical. It's up one day, it's down the next. I mean, it dropped at these tariffs announcements when they started to get made on July, right around the middle of July, when that looked more acute, and it's been kind of in a sideways pattern ever since. Now, if we're looking at relative value to history, there is decent value out that far. In the fourth quarter, especially if you're looking at the October and the December contracts, they're actually trading a couple dollars above their 3-year average settlement history. So that would be the price that the futures contract settles when it reaches expiration. Yep. But we're not performing the seasonal spread, which would be the other metric I look at to find out if we're making a good hedge or not.
Where does CUSMA fit in all of this? As far as, because obviously there are tariffs on the Chinese side and all those sorts of things, but catch us up on sort of where right now, anyway, in the hog industry in Canada, where does it land when it comes to some of these Canada-U.S. issues on trade?
Right. So for now, USMCA, CUSMA, whatever acronym you want to use, but the North American Free Trade Agreement has basically shielded pork. So when tariffs are threatened or retaliatory tariffs are threatened, they're talking about the goods that are not covered under CUSMA, right? Mm-hmm. And that's really important because it allows for a normalized, still uneasy. Don't forget, USMCA CUSMA is going to be renegotiated in 2026. So this issue is not out of the woods even by a long shot. Pork is shielded for now. So that is going to be prime. Let's talk about the 0% pork, Canadian pork coming into America sort of thing. But here's the thing. I'm more concerned about retaliatory measures on the USA because that's where the disappearance dynamic, supply and demand dynamic that determines what the base price is going to be in Canada matters. So I'm going to be a bit hyperbolic here, but I want to make a point. The U.S. administration could put 1,000% on Canadian pork tomorrow, and it could stop at the border, and it's not going to move the price that my producers get one nickel at all. It will be a huge problem for the people that we market our animals into. So the processors that want to ship into the States, that's a huge problem, and I'm not diminishing that. But my primary focus is the producer group that we work with. And if we have any sort of border closures with the U.S. or lack of market access into the U.S., or here's a weird one for you, if Mexico retaliates, which is the number one export destination for the U.S. export, we're not even involved with that dispute one iota. And that could put severe prices on us north of the border simply because we're looking at the supply and demand dynamics in the States. So couple things to that. First of all, I'm more concerned about retaliatory tariffs than I am about Canada actually or becoming the subject of a tariff, other than the processes I've talked about. And number two, or maybe number one, depending on where you prioritize this stuff, NAFTA, CUSMA, USMCA has shielded us for now. That story is to be continued in 2026.
Paul, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me here on RealAg Radio. For those who maybe want to get in touch or want to know more about HAMS Marketing, where can they go?
Right. So two places, really. Our general manager runs our Twitter account, which is HAMS Marketing, at HAMS Marketing with a capital M. And, of course, our website, which is either www.hams.ca, which will also take you to www.hamsmarketing.ca.
There you go. All right. Thank you, Paul. We'll talk again. This has been fascinating.
Thanks, Lyndsey. It's been a pleasure.
All right. We're going to take a quick break here on RealAg Radio on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. And I'll be back with Don Close of Terrain to talk beef markets right after this.
Soil health is under pressure, but real solutions start below the surface. Black Earth offers a full suite of humic solutions, from high-purity granules to powder, liquid, and soluble formulations, all powered by pure Humulite. Formulated for performance, backed by consistency, trusted by growers worldwide from one of the world's rarest reserves. Grow stronger with the power of Black Earth Humulite. Learn more from Mine to Market at blackearth.com.
At Proven Seed, we know that farming in Western Canada doesn't just teach us, it shapes us. Here we face challenges with resilience, innovation, and grit born from decades of experience. We battle the conditions again and again because growing crops here isn't just what we do, it's who we are. We're raised to adapt just like you, with varieties grown specifically for your local conditions. Visit provenseed.ca/raised to adapt to hear our story.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. Joining me now, based at St. Louis, it's Don Close. He's Senior Animal Protein Analyst with Terrain. Don, how are you doing?
I'm good. Pleased to be with you.
Don, tell us a bit about what is keeping you busy these days with Terrain. Which markets do you follow most closely?
So the markets that I personally follow are cattle, beef, and corn. And with that, I'll do some carryover into the other protein markets, and then with corn focusing primarily on feed needs.
Mm-hmm. So last week was kind of a busy one for you then.
It was a big week last week.
How did you manage the WASD report last week? How did that go?
I had the same level of shock that the trade as a whole did, but as from a very probably selfish perspective, the fact that I'm looking at grain specifically, but for feed need purposes, finally, we're catching a break on this one. And what does it mean to the livestock side?
I also have livestock, and I will tell you that while sometimes we can feel bad when corn prices drop, somebody's got to win every once in a while. And so saving on some feed costs, that's okay in my book. So, yes, gigantic corn crop coming, apparently. But we also heard late last week, we did get word that the USDA made a series of announcements regarding screwworm and managing of screwworm, of course, in the southern U.S. Catch us up on sort of where that's at and the impact that is having on the cattle markets, especially for the southern U.S.
So in my view, the big component of the joint press conference with Secretary Rollins and Texas Governor Abbott was that they have given the green light to building the sterile fly production facility. Edinburgh, Texas, that has the capacity to produce as many as 3 million or 30 million flies a week. And so it's a sizable facility. To the best of my understanding, they're hoping to have that up within a year, and that might be a big ask.
Yeah, it is remarkable to me to have learned just how key having access to male sterile flies is in keeping screwworm at bay, keeping it out of the cattle producing regions. Of course, this has had a huge impact, though, on cattle movement from Mexico into the U.S. And walk us through, because we are several months into this now, what is the impact on cattle placements? What has that been? And looking forward, what are we anticipating in the months ahead?
So year to date, with the border was closed since Thanksgiving last year, or November last year. We were open a period of time, April, May, and then closed again. And then they came with the staggered opening, and we're going to open the western inspection points, and that was open a total of 36 hours, and then closed again. The unspoken message in Friday's press conference, the fact that they listed all the things they're doing to prevent the screw fly from reaching the U.S., but there was not a word spoken about when they may be reopening the borders. I think that neglect or absence spoke volumes to how long we might be looking at that border being closed. So what does that mean for U.S. cattle on feed numbers? I think it speaks, is shown in estimates for this coming Friday's cattle on feed report. Estimates in the TCFA or Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico feeding area are estimated to be down 23%.
Wow.
Placement estimates for Nebraska are estimated to be up 6%. So when you look at that kind of displacement on feed numbers, what that means for available supplies of cattle, certainly the fourth quarter of this year, but into the first and second quarters of 26, we'll see a huge displacement between north and south. For this year to date, we've had a weekly average price spread that Nebraska has roughly had a $10 a hundred price advantage over what we call the South Plains. As the shortage of available fed cattle supply, as it is already, but intensifies in the South Plains because of the lack of those Mexican cattle, I think we'll see that price spread narrow. And I don't think it will narrow from weakness in Nebraska, but I think it will narrow from price strength in the South Plains.
Mm-hmm. Now, more than 20%, so as you estimate around 23%, let's say, that's a lot of cattle to try to make up for. So I get what you're saying with the strength side, but to me, how is that going to all play out?
So to put that in a numeric perspective, and I'm working from memory here, but I think with those short periods of the border open, Mexican imports to the U.S. year to date are like 280,000 cattle. And I might be a little bit high with that, but it's just over 200,000. Typically, an average year, we will get between 1 million and 1.2 million Mexican cattle into the U.S. So we're down from where we should be between 750 and 800,000 cattle that will predominantly be fed in those southern feeding regions.
That's a lot of burgers, Don. It's a lot of steaks. Burgers. So yep. America loves beef. Canada loves beef. And we're still eating lots of it. Is this, where is it going to come from, I guess, then?
All right. This is really important. To date, we have a severe cattle shortage problem in North America. We do not have a beef shortage problem. And we have made up that difference by taking the average live weight up about 200 pounds in less than 10 years. And we have, carcass weights at all-time record highs that is helping to compensate. Year to date, U.S. beef production is down just short of 4%. We've largely made that up with the escalation in imports, specifically Australia and Brazil. Mm-hmm. But again, the real takeaway there is, while we have a very real cattle shortage, at this point, we do not have a beef shortage going to consumers.
And so who do we tip our hat to on that one then, Don? Has that been, have we had market signals that work to do that? Has it just been economies of scale? Because 200 pounds live weight in less than 10 years, that's a significant shift genetically. So who gets the credit for that?
That is a great question. That is a great question. I would first answer that by just saying it clearly demonstrates the efficiency of the marketplace. And with that efficiency of the marketplace, number one, I would give credit to the genetics of the cattle we're working with today. Is not only the quality of that product being produced better than it's ever been, but the size of those cattle are continuously getting bigger and will continue to do so. The second area that I would give credibility for is just technology and science and the pharmaceutical or the animal health products, animal nutrition products we're working with today enable cattle feeders to make them that bigger. From there, if you look at the signal that the market's been sending, so then the disparity between what the cost of gain is with corn prices this affordable and cattle prices at all-time record highs, add to that the difficulty cattle feeders are having with what we call the swap, that the value of a fat steer they're selling today opposed to the cost of buying a feeder steer, he has every incentive under the sun to feed him as big as he can get him. So that's what's enabled it to happen, but it's amazing to sit and watch.
Mm-hmm. There's a story there, Don. We got to do that story. All right, we're going to leave it there. I think definitely you've hit on something that I think it was really one of my questions is, do we see any sort of timeline on this border reopening? But indications are not very clear on that one. So we'll keep watching that one. Don, thank you so much for joining me here on RealAg Radio. Really appreciate it. Great to see you.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
We are going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with our last segment here of RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM.
Dairy producers wanted for the first American Dairy Expo, November 5th and 6th at the Champlain Valley Exposition in Vermont. Grab a free breakfast, tour the 200 Company Dairy Innovation Trade Show, meet Olympian and dairy producer El St. Pierre, and take in the Dairy Delivers classroom. November 5th is Dairy Fest at 4 p.m., featuring a massive dairy buffet, live entertainment, and industry networking. Full details, discount coupon, and pre-expo tickets available at AmericanDairyExpo.com.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. Dairy producers are wanted for the first American Dairy Expo, November 5th and 6th at the Champlain Valley Exposition in Vermont. Grab a free breakfast, tour the 200 Company Dairy Innovation Trade Show, meet Olympian and dairy producer El St. Pierre, and take in the Dairy Delivers classroom. Full details, discount code, and pre-expo tickets are available at AmericanDairyExpo.com. That's AmericanDairyExpo.com. All right, as promised, I said I'd get to some news, and so here we go. We've got a couple related stories and some that at recording we hadn't quite heard what would happen. But of note, the Premier of Saskatchewan, Scott Moe, set to make an announcement today near Yorkton in support of canola producers and canola processors. So once we have those details, we will share them. However, he also, in the social media alert, did mention that tomorrow the Ag Minister, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, as well as premiers were set to meet tomorrow to talk further about the canola tariff situation. So we head on over to RealAgriculture.com. We'll be covering that as details are announced. If you don't want to miss out on any of the news I'm covering here or upcoming news that isn't ready at showtime, head on over to realagriculture.com/subscribe. You can sign up for our e-newsletters there. They're free. They're delivered to your inbox every morning, and that will keep you the most up to date other than the radio show here on Rural Radio, Channel 147. All right, related to that, though, we also got news yesterday that Farm Credit Canada is rolling out a new program in light of what they are calling global trade disruption. So, yes, like the canola tariffs, but they're making it more broad than that. However, there is options of new lending and interest payment only options under this new program. you can become a new FCC client, or existing clients can access this new program. You're asked to contact your local FCC rep. So certainly related, and we will see what, if anything, gets announced today or tomorrow when the ag ministers meet. I think I said premiers earlier. I apologize. I meant ag ministers. All right. I told you. Practice is progress, right? We're just working on this. Okay. Also, though, on the program docket, we did also see earlier this week, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada did list the designated areas impacted this year by drought. The designated areas for tax deferral program comes into effect either through flooding, drought, or other disasters. It's a program where if you do choose to downsize the breeding herd or flock based on conditions, you can potentially defer some of that income into a different tax year to try and smooth out potentially the tax burden of it. So do check that out. We do have details on RealAgriculture.com. As I mentioned, there is a pretty detailed map. So it goes essentially county by county or rural municipality by each. There are some areas around the drought affected areas that may also be eligible. So you are advised to head on over to that map and make sure that your area is actually part of the designated tax deferral, and you may be able to exercise that option in your for your income taxes for 2025 if you're impacted by the drought. Also announced today, we've got a new online hub for reporting and learning about wild pigs in Canada. And so this is, as we've covered on this show, and it's a topic that I love to touch on every once in a while because I just find it fascinating and also terrifying, to address the growing ecological and agricultural threat posed by invasive wild pigs, we now have Wild Pigs Canada. So this online hub developed by Invasives Canada and Animal Health Canada in collaboration with Invasive Wild Pig Leadership Group has put together this central hub. So it will have tools, information, resources, and of course a way to report wild pigs and to identify them. And there is, of course, a learning component surrounding this as well for those who maybe aren't aware of the impact of wild hogs. So if you're interested, of course, you can head on over to wildpigs.ca if you want to check it out. We'll have the news story up on RealAgriculture.com as well. And while you're there, you can check out some of our past coverage, some really fascinating discussions on how these wild pigs came to be and how to trap them and just how destructive they can be, and some of the cool technology in trapping them as well. It's very cool. But they are very smart and incredibly destructive. So if you've got trail cam footage, send it on in. Anyway, okay. That does it for me for today's show. Thank you so much for joining me. It has been a fascinating set of conversations today. I learned a lot. I hope you did as well. I really like it when I can stump somebody with a, well, that is a good question, as Don Close said. So that always makes me happy. If you've got feedback, 1-855-776-6147, or you can, of course, zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. Lucky me, I also will be hosting tomorrow's Farmer Rapid Fire, brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada. So tune in 4:30 Eastern, again, right here on Rural Radio Channel 147, and I will be back. I'll also be, of course, on the Friday Issues panel. We will have no shortage of topics to cover this week. Thankfully, a slightly slower news week, but I have a feeling there's going to be plenty to unpack on Friday's show. And of course, as always, find us across social media at Real Agriculture. We're on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, X, you name it. We're there, and give us a follow so you don't miss any of our coverage. Cheers, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.